I'm Queenie, 28. I'm my father's daughter, and tonight I stood in a kitchen that used to be safe. He and I fought over something small, and old wounds opened. He told me, "Don't come back." That line hit like a door slamming shut. I'll tell you what led to it, what I felt in the moment, and why it changed everything. Comment where you're watching from and subscribe for more family drama and honest stories. The sound was not loud at first. It started as a scrape, my chair sliding back on the linoleum. I remember that noise because it always meant a break in the small calm I tried to keep that evening. Outside, the September air was thin and cool. Inside, the kitchen light hum was steady and ordinary. My father's slippers shuffled as he paced near the table. He had not raised his voice yet, not until the last sentence. We were sitting in the same kitchen where I'd learned to write my name on the back of paper plates and tap out rhythm with teaspoons before I could read. The clock above the sink ticked like a patient judge. My mother, May, sat at the end of the table with a paper towel folded in her lap. She had that look people get when they are trying to stop a fight before it begins, hands pressed together, breath shallow, eyes darting for a lull in the wind of our words. I could feel the room tighten like a fist curling around my ribs. My father, Tom, had his jaw set in the usual way. He drinks his coffee black and reads the paper in the morning. Tonight, his hands shook slightly when he moved his mug. It was not the shake of weakness. It was the shake of someone trying to hold steady while an old storm rolled in. It began with money. It always did in small towns like mine. A bill slipped between us like a knife. Not a huge sum. Not the kind of debt that ruins lives. Just one of those quiet, ordinary debts that gnaw at pride. He said the word irresponsible, and I felt a flash because he had used it before like a coin he kept in his pocket to show me. He said I had wasted chances. He said I expected things to be served on a tray. I answered in short sentences. I said I was trying, that I was working 2 jobs, that I was tired of being judged by a single snapshot of my life. Words stacked up. The air tasted like lemon cleaner and last night's takeout. There was a smell of old wood and motor oil from my father's jacket, hanging on the chair back. The clock kept ticking. My mother touched my hand once, thinking perhaps that the touch could slow the momentum of our anger. It did not. My father's voice shifted. It went from measured to hard. He used my childhood nickname in a way that made me feel very small. He called me selfish. He called me reckless. I tried to explain the reasons I had done the things I did. I told him about the layoff at the plant last year. I told him about the nights I slept on a friend's couch. I talked about pride and how it can keep you from asking for help. I spoke with my chest open. I wanted him to know the shape of my struggle. He listened, not with patience, but with the look of a man cataloging flaws. Then he said something that settled into me like cold water. "You always make the same mistakes." The sentence landed, and the room moved a fraction, like a picture hanging lopsided. I remember the way his face changed. For a moment, it looked older than his years. A map of lines and shaded regret. I thought then that maybe there would be an apology, that maybe the tired man who drove me to scout meetings and showed up for school plays would soften. I wanted to be wrong about him. I wanted him to reach across the table and take my hand in a quiet truce. He did not reach. He stood up. The chair scraped. He looked at me with something that resembled finality. He cleared his throat and then, in a voice I did not expect, said, "Don't come back if you walk out that door." It was not the first time he had said words meant to wound, but those words felt like a verdict. The kitchen seemed to lose color for a second. My mother's fingers tightened on her towel until the paper creased. My breath grew narrow, and there was a ringing behind my ears like someone playing a distant bell. I did not walk out immediately. I remember that detail like a photograph. How the light from the window fell on the kettle and made a small shine on the metal. I remember the picture on the wall of me at 6, face smudged with peanut butter, laughing with my father. That photo suddenly looked like evidence of something I would not have again. I saw the map of our shared history, and for the first time I understood how fragile it had been all along. "You don't mean that," I said. My voice was smaller than I planned. People say softer things when they are trying to hold a bond together with words. He didn't answer. He took his coat. The keys jingled when they hit the bowl by the door. The front door shut with a dull thud. The sound echoed in my chest. I heard the car engine start in the driveway, and then the beat of tires on pavement. He left with the radio playing something old. I went to the window and watched his taillights disappear, losing their red into the gray of the road. The house felt suddenly vast, as if it had been built for strangers. After the car left, silence rushed in like a flood. My mother and I sat across from each other, linked by shock. Her face was lined in new places. She kept muttering, "Tom, Tom," as if calling him back would pull him through the air. I felt a strange relief, mixed with a hollow kind of grief. The relief was small and selfish, like the taste of a forbidden thing. I had wanted him to leave. I wanted space to be myself without the constant weight of his judgments. The grief was larger. It felt like the loss of a possibility I could no longer name. I remember standing up then and moving through the house almost without meaning to. I pressed my palms into the counter until my knuckles went white. My mother followed, asking if I needed to sit down. I said no. I walked into my old room, the one with the faded posters and the dent in the wall from when I slammed it as a teenager. That was the exact place where years ago we had promised each other things with childish certainty. The bed smelled faintly of laundry detergent. I sat on the edge and stared at the ceiling. The memory that came to me then was of my father teaching me to change a flat tire on a rainy afternoon. He had been patient that day. He had let me tighten the lug nuts and had shown me how to stand back and check my work. He had laughed at a joke I made about being a mechanic in a dress, and the laugh had been warm, the kind that lets you know you belong in a place. I held that laugh in my mind like a small light, but the present was different. Present Tom had carried an accumulation of things he had not said in the right way. There were slights he had stored. There were disappointments he had turned into lectures. He had seemed to trade affection for authority and used his voice as a barrier. I looked at my hands and thought about all the times I swallowed words to keep the peace. I wondered if those times had built this wall between us. That night I did not sleep. I paced between the kitchen and my room, listening to the house breathe. Outside, the neighbor's television faintly leaked a sitcom laugh track through the walls. The moon made a pale circle on the driveway. I thought about leaving in the literal sense, walking my things out and finding the safety of a friend's couch. The urge was sharp, fueled by pride, and the sting of being dismissed. I thought about revenge in small, petty ways, changing my number, not answering if he called, letting him wonder. Yet, as the night stretched, more complicated thoughts arrived. I considered his age, his health, the hundreds of small things he did that never equaled a stinging sentence. He had worked his hands raw for years. He had shown love through doing rather than saying, fixing the porch railing, keeping the old truck running, making enough money to keep bills paid. Maybe he did not know how to say the soft things. Maybe his silence was not absence, but a kind of clumsy, stubborn care. Still, the words had landed. They had a weight. Don't come back. A phrase that could be a command or a broken plea. I replayed the tone in my head like someone learning to read a map. Had it been anger? Hurt? A desperate test? I could find no neat answer. All I could feel was the heat behind my eyes that comes before tears. I went downstairs as the sun began to lift. Morning light edged into the kitchen, with a softness that made everything look less cruel. My mother moved about as if waking from a bad dream. She asked if I wanted coffee. I nodded and watched her hands as she poured. Her movements were the same as always, gentle and steady. We did not speak about the words themselves at first. We never did something like that, both at once. We circled the subject with small talk about the weather and the neighbor's new fence. Finally, she touched my arm and said, "He said things he didn't mean." Her voice trembled, and I could hear the years in it. There was a plea there, a desire to stitch the torn cloth of family back into one piece. I wanted to nod and accept that healing would come easily, but there was also a stubbornness in me I could not shake. I was tired of giving more than I received. I felt like a plant grown in a window that never gets moved to the sun. We packed a lunch out of habit. Something about routine makes grief less sharp. She wrapped a sandwich with wax paper and put it in my bag. I sat at the table and took a bite, chewing deliberately to keep my voice steady. I thought of the recorded messages my father left on birthdays, short, gruff, stuffed with awkward affection. He once left me a message saying he loved me, and I had kept that message like a coin. But the coin felt tarnished now. Around noon, I made a decision that felt like a hinge turning. I would not answer his calls for a while. I would give myself space. I would not storm out of the house that day, nor would I beg him back. I would stay, but I would distance myself in the small ways that mattered. No texts, no excuses. No more being the person who absorbs all the blame. I stepped outside to clear my head. The air was still cool. A robin hopped along the edge of the lawn, pecking at something only it seemed to know mattered. A child 2 houses down rode a bicycle, wobbling and laughing. And for a second, the ordinary threads of life continued as if ours was not fraying. I stood in the driveway and watched smoke drift from a neighbor's chimney. The scent of wood smoke mixed with the faint sweetness of someone's home-baked bread. It was simple. It was real. When I turned to go back inside, I realized that the moment had already shaped me. The words had done what words do. They carved a new line for me to walk. I would not pretend nothing had happened. I would not accept a casual return to the old pattern of being small and apologizing for the space I needed. Something had shifted. The kitchen that once felt comfortable now held an echo of a choice. That evening, I sat at the table alone. The chair across from me was empty, and for the first time in years, that emptiness did not feel shameful. It felt like an invitation to become someone who held her own fears without depending on another's approval. I thought of the laugh from the picture on the wall and smiled briefly, a small, private thing. Then I breathed out and let the air of the house settle around me like a soft blanket that was not asked for and not rejected. The night closed gently. My mother went to bed early, exhausted from being the quiet bridge between 2 stubborn people. I washed the dishes and listened to the water whisper down the drain. There was no dramatic rescue, no sudden apology, only the ordinary sounds of a life moving forward. The words were still there, heavy as a stone in my chest. I could not move them. I could only learn to carry them differently. Before sleep took me, I sat at the window once more and wrote a short note in my head, not for anyone else, but to myself. I will not let his command define whether I can return to what is important. I will set my terms. I will be brave. The words felt like a small plan. The next morning would arrive with its own tests. Tonight, the house held only me and the memory of a sentence that would shape what came next. The morning after those words shattered my world felt strangely quiet, too quiet, almost like the house itself was holding its breath. Sunlight spilled through the half-closed blinds, painting thin golden stripes across the wall where my childhood photos used to hang. Some of them were gone, now, tucked inside a box I'd hidden in my closet months ago, back when I still hoped things could be fixed. I woke up feeling weightless and heavy all at once, the way you feel after crying yourself dry. My father's voice still echoed in my head. "Don't come back." 3 words, simple, sharp, final. I didn't dream about them. I relived them. Every blink, every heartbeat replayed, that seemed like a cruel recording I couldn't turn off. The coffee machine gurgled downstairs, the familiar sound that once meant comfort, but now it felt like noise from someone else's life. I sat up slowly, my throat tight. My reflection in the mirror looked like a stranger. Puffy eyes, pale lips, hair sticking to my cheek. I whispered to the girl staring back, "You're okay, Queenie, you're okay," though I didn't believe it. Somewhere deep down, I already knew what I was going to do. It wasn't a sudden decision. It had been forming inside me for years, quietly building like pressure beneath the surface. But that morning, it became real. The words that broke me were also the ones that pushed me towards something I never thought I'd have the strength to do: leave. Downstairs, I could hear my mom moving around the kitchen, her footsteps soft, almost hesitant. She didn't knock on my door, didn't ask if I was coming down for breakfast. That silence said everything. She always tried to stay neutral, to keep peace between us. But sometimes neutrality is just another word for fear. I opened my window slightly, letting in the crisp morning air. It smelled like rain and cold earth, like new beginnings and goodbyes. My hands shook as I pulled the old suitcase from under my bed. It still had a faded sticker from a family trip we took when I was 10, back when laughter still lived in our house. I hesitated before opening it. Leaving meant more than walking out the door. It meant cutting away the version of me that always stayed, always forgave, always hoped. I began folding my clothes methodically, piece by piece. The sound of fabric brushing against itself was oddly soothing. I picked up my favorite sweater, pale blue, the one Mom bought me after my first heartbreak, and pressed it to my chest. I remembered how she smiled that day, how proud she was that I was strong enough to move on. I wondered if she'd smile now if she knew I was moving on from them. My phone buzzed, a text from my friend Margot. "You okay? Didn't see you at work last night." I stared at the screen, fingers hovering. What could I say? "No, I'm not okay." My dad told me to disappear, and I think I finally will. Instead, I typed, "Taking a break. Need to clear my head." She replied with a heart emoji and a promise of a couch if I needed it. That tiny gesture, that simple kindness, made my throat ache. Maybe I wouldn't have to face the world completely alone. As I packed, memories kept ambushing me. Dad teaching me to ride a bike, cheering when I didn't fall, laughing when I did. Then later, his laughter turning into sighs, sighs into silence, silence into scolding. Somewhere between those years, love became conditional, measured, heavy. I used to think if I just tried harder, spoke softer, achieved more, he'd look at me the way he used to. But love that needs proof isn't love. It's control wrapped in affection. The zipper on my suitcase stuck halfway. I tugged it loose, muttering under my breath, when a soft knock came at my door. "Queenie," Mom's voice, gentle, uncertain. My heart stuttered. For a second, I thought she'd come to stop me, to ask me to stay. I almost wanted her to. "Yes," I said, forcing calm. "Breakfast is ready if you want." That was it. No mention of last night, no apology, no acknowledgement. Just breakfast. Like everything was fine. "I'm not hungry," I said quietly. Her footsteps faded. The emptiness that followed filled the room louder than any argument. When the suitcase was full, I sat on the bed and stared at it. The decision still felt like a dream, too big for my hands to hold. I reached for a pen and a small notepad from my desk. My handwriting trembled as I wrote. Mom, I love you. I really do. But I can't stay where I'm treated like a mistake. Maybe one day we can talk again when it's not about blame or pride. For now, I need peace. Please understand. Q. The ink smudged where a tear landed. I didn't bother wiping it away. Maybe she'd see it and know it wasn't anger that drove me, it was exhaustion. Downstairs, the sound of the TV hummed. My dad's voice echoed faintly. He was talking on the phone, laughing about something mundane, like last night hadn't happened. My heart twisted. How could someone destroy you and then move on so easily? I lifted the suitcase, my arms trembling with the weight, not just of clothes, but of memories. Every step toward the front door felt like walking through wet cement. The floor creaked, and my dad turned slightly from the couch. Our eyes met. He frowned. "Where are you going?" My throat closed. I wanted to scream. "You told me to leave." But I kept my voice steady. "You said not to come back." He blinked, expression unreadable. For a moment, I thought he might apologize, say he didn't mean it. Instead, he just looked back at the TV. "Do what you want." The words landed like stones. There was no shouting this time, no dramatic ending. Just indifference, the quietest cruelty of all. I opened the door. The cold morning air hit my face, sharp and alive. I stepped outside, gripping the handle of my suitcase like it was an anchor keeping me upright. Behind me, I heard my mother's voice call softly, "Queenie, wait!" I froze. Every instinct screamed to turn back. But I knew if I did, I'd stay trapped in that endless cycle of apology and pain. Without looking back, I said, "I love you, Mom," and closed the door behind me. The world outside looked exactly the same. Trees swaying, cars passing, birds chirping, but everything inside me had shifted. I walked down the street, heart pounding, the weight of freedom pressing against my chest. The bus stop wasn't far. I sat on the cold metal bench, suitcase beside me, staring at the horizon. My reflection in the glass shelter looked both lost and alive. For the first time in years, there was silence inside my head, no echo of his disappointment, no fear of saying the wrong thing. Just silence. When the bus arrived, I climbed aboard, found a seat near the back, and watched the neighborhood blur past the window. Every familiar corner looked foreign now, as if I'd already become someone else. My hands trembled in my lap, and I whispered under my breath, "You did it, Queenie! You actually did it." Halfway through the ride, I started crying quietly, uncontrollably. The old woman sitting across from me offered a tissue without a word. I took it, nodded, and smiled weakly. Maybe she saw the story in my eyes, the courage and the heartbreak stitched together. I got off near Margot's place. She opened the door before I even knocked, wrapping me in a hug that broke what little strength I had left. "You're staying here tonight, okay?" she said, leading me inside. Her apartment smelled like cinnamon and coffee. Warm, messy, real. I sank onto the couch, clutching the cup of tea she handed me. "I finally left," I whispered. Margot smiled sadly. "Good. It's time you stopped bleeding for people who never noticed the wounds." Her words hit deeper than I expected. For hours, we just sat there, talking about everything and nothing. When she fell asleep, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was just quiet, peaceful even. Still, the ache lingered. I wondered if Mom had found my note, if she'd cried. I wondered if Dad even noticed I was gone. The thought hurt, but it also reminded me why I left. Around midnight, I stepped out onto the balcony. The city lights flickered like distant stars, and the wind carried the faint sound of laughter from somewhere below. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply. For the first time in my life, the future felt uncertain, but it was mine. I whispered into the night, "I'll make something of this. I'll make something of me." The fear was still there, but so was something stronger. Hope. Not loud or dramatic, just steady, waiting to grow. And maybe one day, when I'm ready, I'll forgive them. Not for them, but for me. That night, as I drifted to sleep on Margot's couch, I realized cutting them off wasn't an ending. It was the first real beginning I'd ever had. The days after leaving home are oddly calm. Queenie tries to act fine. She makes coffee, helps Margot with chores, scrolls through her phone pretending life is moving forward. But underneath, there's a deep ache, an emptiness where her father's voice used to echo. She feels both free and lost, like someone who finally escaped a storm but doesn't know which direction to walk now. At night, she lies awake listening to the soft hum of traffic outside Margot's window. She wonders if her dad misses her, if her mom is okay, but she refuses to reach out. Her pride is the only thing holding her together. One morning, Margot brings in the mail, casual, chatting about grocery sales, when she pauses, holding an envelope. It's cream-colored, official-looking, and addressed to Ms. Queenie Miller. The return address, Baldwin and Hensley, attorneys at law. Margot frowns. "Girl, did you do something illegal?" she jokes, trying to lighten the mood. But Queenie's stomach drops. She's never received anything from a law office in her life. Her hands tremble as she takes the envelope. It feels heavy, not just with paper, but with something unspoken. For hours, Queenie can't bring herself to open it. She places it on the coffee table, walks past it a dozen times, pretending she doesn't see it. But every glance feels like it's pulling her closer. Margot eventually leaves for work, and Queenie is alone. The ticking of the wall clock grows louder, each second stretching like a question she's afraid to answer. Finally, with shaking hands, she slides her thumb under the flap. Inside, a neatly folded letter with her full name typed at the top, and a single line that makes her knees weaken. This letter concerns the estate and passing of Mr. Mark Miller. She freezes. Her father's name, the word passing. It takes a full minute before she can breathe again. Her first reaction isn't tears, it's denial. She reads the line over and over, trying to find a hidden meaning, hoping it's a mistake. Her father was fine when she left. Angry, sure, but alive. Her throat tightens, her vision blurs. And before she knows it, she's sitting on the floor, letter still open, whispering, "No, no, no." The words blur together. Legal jargon, will reading, property, beneficiaries. None of it matters. All she can think of is the last time she saw him. The shouting, his face red with anger, his final words echoing, "Don't come back." Now, she never can. Margot rushes home early after Queenie calls her in a shaking voice. When Margot reads the letter, her face softens. She hugs Queenie tight, whispering, "I'm so sorry." Margot suggests calling her mom, but Queenie refuses. She's too angry, too confused, too heartbroken. How could her father be gone, and no one tell her? Did they even try to reach her? Did her mom know where she was? That night, she sits by the window, the letter beside her. The city lights blur like tears. Every car passing feels like time moving forward without her. A few days later, the attorney's office calls, asking her to attend the will reading. The words feel surreal. Will reading like something that happens to other people, not her. Margot offers to go with her, but Queenie says no. She needs to face this alone. The drive back to her hometown is haunting. Every familiar landmark, the diner, the gas station, the rusted mailbox, feels frozen in time. When she passes the house she grew up in, She can't look directly at it. The curtains are closed. The porch light is off. It doesn't feel like home anymore. The office is small and smells faintly of coffee and old books. Behind the desk sits Mr. Baldwin, a calm, older man with kind eyes. He greets her softly. "Miss Miller, I'm deeply sorry for your loss." The phrase feels foreign. Your loss. She doesn't know how to respond, so she just nods. Mr. Baldwin explains that her father had already settled most affairs before passing: his insurance, his mortgage, even his medical bills. Then, he hands her a sealed envelope. "Your father left this specifically for you," he says, in his own handwriting. Her heart races. Her name is written across the front in bold, steady letters. For a moment, she just stares at it, fingers trembling. Mr. Baldwin offers privacy, stepping out of the room. Queenie opens the envelope, and a small flash drive falls out along with a handwritten note. The note reads, "Play this. You'll understand everything." Her chest tightens. Mr. Baldwin helps her plug it into a laptop. A small video window pops up. Her father's face fills the screen. He looks older, thinner, but his eyes the same. When he speaks, her breath catches. "If you're watching this, I guess I couldn't say what I needed to in person. Maybe I was too proud. Maybe I thought I had more time." His voice shakes slightly, but he continues. "Queenie, I know I said things I shouldn't have. I wanted to make you stronger, but I ended up pushing you away. You think I didn't care, but I saw everything. Every job you tried, every setback you hid. I paid off those hospital bills you couldn't handle. I wanted you to feel free of debt, not of me." She covers her mouth, trembling. Tears stream down her face as his words hit her like waves. "You think I said, 'Don't come back,' because I didn't love you. Truth is, I didn't want you to see me getting worse. The doctor said I had limited time. I wanted you to remember me as strong, not fading." He pauses, coughing lightly, then smiles faintly. "I hope one day you'll forgive me. And if you ever come home, fix the porch swing." I never got around to it. The video ends. Silence fills the room. All Queenie can hear is her heartbeat. She sits frozen, staring at the blank screen. Her father, the man she thought hated her, was protecting her all along. Every cruel word now feels like a misunderstood act of love. She sobs uncontrollably, not graceful tears, but deep, aching ones, muffled, raw, years of resentment breaking open at once. Mr. Baldwin quietly returns, places a hand on her shoulder, and says, "He talked about you every time he came in. You were all he cared about." That breaks her completely. She leaves the office clutching the flash drive, unable to speak. As she drives away, the sun is setting, orange streaks across a pale blue sky. Every mile feels heavier, but also lighter, like she's carrying both grief and peace together. She passes the old park where her dad taught her to ride a bike, the grocery store where he used to wave from the parking lot. Her world hasn't changed, but her understanding of it has. She finally whispers into the silence, "I'm sorry, Dad. I just didn't know." Her voice cracks, but this time she doesn't hide from it. The letter didn't just stop her heart, it started it again. The section closes with Queenie parked by a quiet lake at dusk. She replays the message one more time, letting his voice fill the air. No music, no tears left, just quiet acceptance. Her final thought before turning off the car: "He never wanted me gone. He just wanted me to find my way back." And for the first time since leaving home, Queenie feels like she knows what her next step will be. I sat there, the car engine off, just staring at the lake as the last streaks of sunlight faded into gray. The cool evening air wrapped around me like a fragile shield, yet it couldn't stop the ache in my chest. My father's voice still lingered in my mind, soft but insistent. echoing through every crevice of my memory. He never wanted me gone. He just wanted me to find my way back. For the first time, I felt like I was standing at the edge of something I wasn't ready to face. That letter, that video, had opened a door I thought I'd slammed shut forever, but I wasn't prepared for what waited on the other side. I reached for the flash drive again, turning it over in my hands as though the weight of it could somehow explain everything. I drove home slowly, the streets empty and familiar. The town had changed so little, the corner bakery, the rusted swing set at the park, even the old library where I used to hide when I was 10, yet everything about me had changed. Every street seemed to whisper questions I didn't know how to answer. Questions about forgiveness, about truth, about what I'd missed. By the time I parked outside my old house, night had fully settled in. The house was dark, silent. I could almost hear it breathing in the shadows. Part of me wanted to run away again, but a stronger, stranger part demanded that I go inside. I pushed open the door, the familiar creak of the hinges like a warning and an invitation all at once. The living room smelled faintly of dust and old memories. Nothing had moved. Nothing had changed. I noticed the old family photos on the mantel, a younger version of Dad laughing at some long-forgotten joke, Mom smiling beside him, and me, with a huge grin, ice cream smeared on my cheek. My fingers itched to touch them, to reconnect with a past that felt simultaneously distant and immediate. And then I heard it, a voice from the kitchen. "Queenie." It was soft, hesitant. My mom. She had heard me come in. My throat tightened. I hadn't spoken to her since leaving, hadn't returned her calls or texts. I wasn't sure if I wanted to. And yet, hearing her voice now, I realized I had been waiting for this moment without knowing it. I stepped into the kitchen. The dim light outlined her figure, and her eyes immediately sought mine. There was a mixture of relief, fear, and something I couldn't quite name in them. I didn't know if you'd ever come back," she whispered. I had to. I admitted, my voice breaking. I had to know what really happened. She nodded, silent for a moment. Then she led me to the small dining table. On it sat a stack of papers, letters, documents, and one envelope that I hadn't noticed before. My father's handwriting sprawled across it in neat, careful letters. My heart skipped a beat. "That came for you," she said softly. He wanted you to have it after everything." I picked it up with trembling hands. The envelope was thick, heavy, and sealed with wax, his seal. I broke it open slowly, fearing what I might find. Inside, a letter unfolded, written in the same steady handwriting I'd known since childhood. "Queenie, if you are reading this, it means I'm gone. I'm so sorry I couldn't tell you this myself. I should have explained everything, but I was scared of losing you in another way, not to distance, but to death itself." My chest tightened. Death. That word hit me like a physical blow. My father had been dying, and I had walked away thinking it was anger, thinking it was pride. I never told you because I wanted to protect you. You were always so young, so full of hope. I didn't want to burden you with my sickness, with the reality that I didn't have much time left. Every harsh word I said, every angry outburst, it wasn't about you. It was fear. Fear that you'd see me fade and blame yourself for not coming back sooner. I sank into the chair, the letter trembling in my hands. I couldn't breathe for a moment. All those years of resentment, all the moments I believed I was abandoned, were suddenly twisted into something I couldn't untangle. The truth, Queenie, is harder than anything you've imagined. Your mother and I tried to handle it quietly. We didn't know how to tell you. We thought if we shielded you, you'd be safe. But in doing so, I see now I caused more pain than I ever imagined. You weren't abandoned. You were loved in the only way I knew how to love while dying. I pressed my hands against my face, the tears coming unbidden. I had wanted to scream at him, to rage at the unfairness of his silence. But instead, I was broken open, vulnerable, and most terrifyingly, I realized I could forgive him, but not just yet. Not until I understood fully. I turned back to the letter. Another page fell free, revealing more of the truth. There's something else. I need you to know the truth about our family, about me. My heart skipped. Another secret? I thought I'd braced myself for everything, but my stomach twisted into knots. When I was your age, I lost someone very close to me. I lost a brother. It changed everything. I didn't want to see the same mistakes repeated. When your mother and I argued, when I raised my voice, when I told you not to come back, it wasn't because I hated you. I was trying not to lose you to the same fate I lost him to sickness, to misfortune, to life itself. I failed at explaining, and for that, I am sorry. The letter stopped me cold. My father had been carrying a secret grief that I'd never known, shaping the way he parented, the way he disciplined, the way he loved. Everything I had ever felt as rejection suddenly had a different hue, a complicated, painful love I hadn't been ready to see. I sank lower in my chair, legs trembling. I thought about all the fights, all the nights spent crying in my room while he stormed around the house. He had been scared, afraid of losing me in ways I had never understood. And then the final paragraph, the one that made my chest seize with both grief and awe. Queenie, if you are reading this, I hope you know that my love for you was always more than pride, more than anger, more than words could ever show. I hope you can forgive me, not because I am worthy, but because it is the only way to heal both of us. And please, live your life fully. Don't let my mistakes chain you. Be free, be strong, and remember that you were my greatest joy every single day. I collapsed into my hands, sobbing. The truth I had never wanted to hear, that he had been protecting me, loving me in silence, dying silently while I had been angry, crushed me, and freed me all at once. I looked up at my mother, who was sitting quietly beside me, holding my hand. Her eyes were wet too, but her presence grounded me. I didn't know how to tell you, she whispered. I didn't know either. I admitted. I thought he hated me. I thought you hated me. She shook her head. No, sweetheart. He was scared. All of us were scared. And now it's time we face the truth together. For hours, we sat there, reading through the papers he had left behind, letters, notes, reminders, little confessions about his regrets and fears. Each one hit me harder than the last, revealing a man I had misunderstood entirely. Not cruel, not indifferent, but deeply human, deeply afraid. By the end of the night, I felt exhausted physically and emotionally. My father was gone. The truth was out. And yet, in that painful revelation, I felt the faintest spark of something I hadn't felt in years. Understanding. Understanding didn't erase the hurt. It didn't fix the years of anger or betrayal, but it was a start. And for the first time in my life, I felt a connection to him that I could finally acknowledge. Sitting at the kitchen table, letter in hand, I whispered into the silence. I hear you now, Dad. I understand, and I will try to forgive you. The night stretched on. The truth was heavy, but it was real. And in that truth, I realized I wasn't the same scared girl who had run away. I was Queenie, broken, yes, but capable of carrying both grief and love together. For the first time, I let myself believe that healing was possible, and that sometimes the hardest truths are the ones we need most. The next morning, I woke to the soft light of the sun spilling through Margot's blinds, but I didn't move right away. My body felt heavy, weighted with grief, love, and the strange ache of understanding that comes after learning a truth you never wanted to hear. the letter, and the video had changed something inside me, something fragile yet unbreakable, and now I knew there was more to see, more to understand. I picked up the flash drive again, holding it as though it were a lifeline. Every night since my father's passing, I had replayed his words, letting them echo through the empty rooms of my mind. But today, I felt a pull, a quiet, insistent tug that told me I had to go back to the house, to face what he had left behind. Not just the letters, not just the confessions, but everything, the memories, the objects, the small remnants of a life that had shaped mine in ways I hadn't understood until now. The drive, there felt different this time. I wasn't angry and I wasn't scared. I was curious and a little apprehensive. Each familiar street, each corner of the town, held a memory I hadn't realized I carried. I passed the bakery, where Dad used to treat me to chocolate croissants on Saturday mornings. I remembered the way he'd tap his finger on the counter impatiently while I chose the biggest one, grinning at my indulgence. I smiled faintly through tears. Those memories weren't bitter anymore. They were his gift, pieces of him left behind. When I arrived at the house, it was quiet. The door didn't creak this time, maybe because I had grown up in it, or maybe because it knew I wasn't running anymore. I stepped inside, and the familiar scent of aged wood, dust, and old leather wrapped around me. It was comforting, almost like a hug from a time I had forgotten existed. I walked slowly through each room, letting my fingers graze the furniture, the walls, the photographs. Every object was a story, every corner a memory. In the living room, the old family photos I had seen the night before now felt different. I lingered on one of Dad holding me when I was 3, his eyes crinkled with laughter, his hand steady on my tiny shoulder. He had loved me in ways I hadn't understood, ways he hadn't known how to show openly. Then I noticed the small desk in the corner of the study, Dad's workspace. The leather chair was worn, the desk cluttered with papers and notebooks, but among the chaos, there were neat stacks tied with string. Curious, I picked one up. It was labeled in his handwriting, "For Queenie, Memories and Lessons." My hands trembled as I untied the string. Inside were letters, photographs, and small trinkets. The first letter I opened was from when I had been 10. He had written about my first school play, how proud he had been when I stumbled through my lines, but still managed to make the audience laugh. Tears blurred my vision as I read his words. "You are stronger than you know, Queenie. Don't let fear stop you from shining." Next was a photograph of us fishing at the lake behind the old mill. I remembered that day vividly. I had been scared of the water, and Dad had coaxed me into the boat anyway. I had clutched the sides, heart racing, and he had smiled, letting me feel safe while I challenged myself. He had always found a way to guide me, sometimes gently, sometimes with what I had thought was cruelty, but always with love hidden beneath. As I continued through the piles, I found a small box labeled, "When I'm gone." Inside were objects that told a story. My father's watch, my mother's locket that he had secretly polished, a tiny model of the lighthouse I had always wanted to see, and even a folded piece of fabric from my baby blanket. Each item was carefully chosen, preserved with a thoughtfulness that made my heart ache. And then I found something I wasn't expecting, a journal. Its leather cover was cracked, the pages filled with his handwriting. I opened it tentatively, and immediately felt like I was stepping into his mind. Each entry was raw, emotional, sometimes filled with fear and regret, but always honest. One entry described the day I left home. "I hate that I let my pride push her away. I should have hugged her instead of yelling. I should have explained. I should have just been there. I see now that love isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, and sometimes it's hidden under mistakes. I hope one day Queenie will understand." I sobbed quietly, the sound swallowed by the empty house. I realized that he had known, even in his last moments, that he had pushed me away, that his words had hurt me more than anything, and yet he had left this journal, these letters, these small pieces of himself, so I could understand, so I could forgive. I spent hours in that study, reading through every note, every letter, every scrap of paper. Some entries were mundane, about bills and appointments, but even those carried his care. He had made sure I would be taken care of, even without asking. There were plans, reminders, small acts of thoughtfulness that I had dismissed in life, but now understood as his quiet devotion. By late afternoon, I moved to the attic. I hadn't been up there since I was a child, but Dad had left me another surprise, boxes labeled for later and to remember. I opened the first box and found my childhood drawings, my school awards, and even my first diary. Each item was a thread connecting me back to the life I had shared with him, to the moments I had once thought unimportant. And then I found letters addressed to me, but never sent, letters about my future, my dreams, and his hopes for me. Some of them were simple. Queenie, never forget how bright your light is. Always chase it. Others were confessions. I was scared. I didn't want to burden you with my illness. I regret that I didn't tell you sooner. It was overwhelming. I realized that what he left behind wasn't just material things. It was pieces of his heart, of his mind, of his love that he had tried to show me all along. He had left behind a map of understanding, a trail that could guide me through the grief, through the confusion, through the anger, and into forgiveness. As the evening deepened, I sat on the attic floor, surrounded by his life. I found a letter that made me pause, carefully folded, with a post-it that said, "Read when you are ready to know the truth." My hands shook as I unfolded it. "Queenie, you may not understand this now, but there is something I need to confess." When I said, "Don't come back," it was out of fear. Fear that you'd see me weak, and fear that my sickness would steal your happiness. I never meant to push you away for good. I wanted you to have a life free from my pain. I realize now that I underestimated your strength, and I am proud of you for making your own choices, even when it meant leaving me behind. I could feel the weight of every unspoken word lifting slightly. He hadn't wanted to hurt me. He had wanted to protect me in the only way he knew. And even in death, he had left me a way to understand him fully. By the time I descended from the attic, night had fallen completely. The house was quiet again, but it felt alive, filled with the echoes of his voice, his laughter, his love. I carried the journal and letters to the living room, placing them carefully on the coffee table. I sat there for a long time, reflecting on everything he had left behind, the tangible memories, the lessons, and the emotional inheritance of his care and love. I realized that forgiveness wasn't just about letting go of anger. It was about understanding, about seeing the intention behind the actions, even when they hurt. And in that understanding, I found peace. That night, as I finally lay in my childhood bedroom, the room I had fled from so many times, I felt a closeness to my father I had never experienced before. He was gone, yes, but he had left behind a legacy of love, care, and subtle guidance that would stay with me forever. I whispered into the darkness, my voice steady and calm. "Thank you, Dad, for everything. I see you now. I understand you. I love you." For the first time since leaving home, I felt whole, not because the pain was gone, but because what he left behind allowed me to carry it with grace, to learn from it, and to live in a way that honored him. And as I drifted off to sleep, surrounded by the fragments of his life, I knew that his legacy, the love, the lessons, the letters, and the quiet guidance would remain with me forever. As the first light of dawn crept through the blinds, I sat quietly at the edge of my childhood bed, the letters and journals spread around me like pieces of a life I had thought I'd abandoned. The house was still, almost reverent in the way it held the echoes of my father's voice, his laughter, and even the silences that had once felt unbearable. I could feel him there, not in flesh, not in sound, but in the spaces between memories, in the weight of the paper in my hands, in the way every small object whispered his presence. I thought about the anger I had carried for so long, how it had grown and festered into something that felt like part of me. And yet, sitting here now, I realized it had never been the whole truth. My father's anger, his harsh words, his distant stares, all of it had been filtered through fear. Fear of losing me, fear of my seeing him falter, fear of the fragility of life itself. He had shielded me from the reality of his illness, from his vulnerabilities, in ways I had never understood. And in doing so, he had unintentionally created the gap I had so desperately tried to fill with my own resentment. I held one of his letters close to my chest, feeling the ridges of the paper against my palm, and I whispered a quiet apology into the empty room. "I'm sorry, Dad. I wish I had understood sooner. I wish I had seen your love, even when it was hidden under fear." And in the act of speaking it aloud, I felt a strange, liberating shift. My anger didn't vanish entirely, it couldn't, and perhaps it shouldn't, but it lost its power over me. It was transformed, shaped into something softer, something more human. It became a part of my understanding, a thread connecting me to him in a way I had never allowed myself before. I realized that what he left behind wasn't just letters or objects or memories. It was a roadmap for love, for forgiveness, for understanding. Each note, each carefully preserved item, each confession of fear and regret was a piece of his soul, placed deliberately so that I could see it, hold it, and learn from it. And in that, there was a lesson I hadn't anticipated. Love isn't always loud or visible. Sometimes it is quiet, sometimes imperfect, sometimes wrapped in mistakes or withheld words. But it is always there, waiting for recognition, waiting for acceptance. The house felt warmer as I moved through it. One last time that morning, I touched the edge of the desk, ran my fingers along the spines of the books on the shelves, and paused at the window overlooking the yard where I had once played, where I had once cried, where I had once hoped for answers. Everything that had seemed cold and unfeeling now felt like a living testament to the man who had been trying, in his flawed, human way, to give me everything he could. As I prepared to leave, I gathered the letters and journals carefully, tucking them into a bag that felt heavier than it should have been. Not because of the paper, but because of the weight of everything they carried. Love, regret, hope, and the reminder that life is fragile and fleeting, that misunderstandings can last lifetimes if left unresolved, and that truth, no matter how difficult, is always worth facing. Stepping out into the morning air, I took a deep breath. The world beyond the house felt brighter, more alive, not because the pain was gone, but because I had made peace with it. I had learned that healing is not linear, that understanding is not immediate, and that love, even when flawed, leaves a mark that nothing can erase. My father's legacy was not in the things he left behind. It was in the life he had shaped, the lessons he had imparted, and the opportunity he had given me to forgive, to grow, and to live fully. And as I walked down the familiar street, the letter tucked securely in my bag, I whispered one last time to the house, to the man who had both terrified and comforted me, "Thank you, Dad, for your love, your mistakes, and for everything you never knew how to say. I carry it all with me, and I will honor it." In that moment, I felt a quiet, unshakable strength. I was no longer just the girl who had been hurt, who had left, who had feared returning. I was Queenie, shaped by loss, by truth, by love, and for the first time in years, I felt free. Free to live, free to love, and free to forgive, carrying everything he had left behind as a guiding light, not a burden.